My sister sent me a letter calling me selfish and heartless. She doesn't know how many nights I starved so she could eat. I don't think she ever will. I still remember the way she said it, so calm, so sharp it cut through me like glass. Life would be better without you, Mom said. And that was the moment I decided to let her prove it. By Thursday, the cracks were already showing. Bills went unpaid. My little sister cried herself to sleep. And a knock from CPS echoed through the house like a final verdict. It all began with a single conversation at our kitchen table. Mom swiped across the iPad I had bought her, like this was some business transaction. This, she said, tapping the screen, limits you to sibling obligations only. No more pretending to be their mother. Sign it. Behind her, my siblings, 15 and 17, just stood there, stiff, with blank faces that said everything and nothing at the same time. Clara, you're not that important, Mom added. Nobody asked you to do all that. The irony? My childhood ended at 10 because she never acted like a mom. Someone had to. I was the one making lunches while she disappeared with her latest boyfriend. I was the one explaining puberty to my sister because she didn't even notice when Elena got her period. 3 years ago. I stared at them, their smug little victory faces, and smiled as I signed. So why didn't you just say it earlier? I thought. You want a sister? You'll get one. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Mom's laughter echoing through the house. She was on speakerphone, bragging to her new boyfriend. Everything's already so much better, she said proudly. Should have done this years ago. My siblings strutted through the kitchen, eating the last of the meals I'd prepped on Sunday and wearing the clean clothes I'd washed over the weekend. They thought this was a win. So, I let them have it. Monday morning felt different. I actually had time to breathe. I bought myself a Starbucks breakfast for the first time ever. I even tried that ice roller trend I'd seen online. Meanwhile, back home, the chaos began. Turns out teenagers don't magically wake up on their own. Marco missed his first period exam. Elena showed up to school in yesterday's wrinkled clothes with tangled hair and no lunch money. Mom got written up at work for being 2 hours late, because surprise, morning routines don't run themselves. By Thursday, the house had become a living, breathing mess. I came home to find Marco wearing his sweaty PE uniform to regular classes because every other shirt smelled like BO. Mom was on the phone with the utility company, trying to beg for an extension because, shocker, bills don't pay themselves. Hey, Clara, Marco said casually, like nothing had happened. Quick favor? Can you grab me some deodorant when you're out? I smiled sweetly. Sorry, that sounds like overstepping my sibling boundaries. Come on, sis. Don't be petty. Petty? I pulled up the agreement on my phone. This says sibling duties. Buying your deodorant sounds a lot like mothering. He muttered something about me being emotional and walked away. The stench, however, lingered for another week. Saturday was Elena's big orchestra presentation. Normally, I'd press her dress, style her hair, and make sure everything was perfect. This time, I sat in the audience and watched her walk on stage in a wrinkled, stained outfit. Parents whispered. Kids pointed. And when the teacher asked Mom about the dress code, I spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, we had a little family restructuring, I said with a polite smile. I was overstepping before. Now Mom's in charge for the first time ever, right Mom? Her face went pale. Parents turned. Eyes burned into her. She made me sign an agreement, I added, handing the teacher a copy. No more Clara dictatorship. The teacher's smile melted into concern. Elena ran to the bathroom in tears. And Mom just stood there, frozen, as the whispers grew louder. Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Hi Clara, Mrs. Schneider, the guidance counselor, said softly. I'm calling about some concerns regarding your siblings' welfare. I didn't even hesitate. I have no authority over them anymore, I said flatly. They made that clear. Clara, but you've always. No. They set their boundaries. I'm respecting them. 20 minutes later, my door burst open. Mom's mascara was streaked down her cheeks. Please, Clara, she cried. CPS is coming. If they see the house like this. Like what? I asked, tilting my head. You know what? The dishes. The laundry. The empty fridge. Marco's grades. Wow, I whispered. Sounds like a lot of mothering work. Good thing you're the mom. She begged me to help clean up. But before either of us could move, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. A woman in a navy blazer stood on the porch, flashing her badge. Hello, Mrs. Laurent. Child Protective Services. We've received multiple concerning reports. Mom's face turned white. I just stepped aside, smiling gently. The stench hit the social worker the second she crossed the threshold. Her nose wrinkled. Her eyes widened. Dishes with mold in the sink. Overflowing trash. Marco standing there in the same crusty PE jersey, yellow sweat stains blooming like a badge of neglect. She began snapping photos. Click, click, click. Pizza boxes scattered across the living room. Laundry piles on the couch. The fridge? Empty except for a rotting container of something that used to be food. This is just a bad week, Mom stammered. We're usually more organized. The woman gave her a look that said I don't believe a word you're saying. Mrs. Laurent, we've received multiple reports from the school, the social worker said, scrolling on her tablet. Your son's clothing, your daughter's recital, their complaints of hunger. Mom opened and closed her mouth like a goldfish. I need to speak with each child separately, the woman added. Starting with Clara. Mom tried to follow us, but the social worker raised a hand. Privately, Mrs. Laurent. We sat at the dining table, the only clean spot in the house, because it's where I used to do my homework. Clara, she said gently, I understand there's been some changes recently. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of the agreement. Her eyebrows shot up. She made you sign this? She said I was making everything about myself. That I should just stick to sibling chores. The woman started typing rapidly. What were you doing before this? I let out a shaky breath. Everything. She looked up. Be specific. I woke them up every day at 6:30. Made breakfast. Packed lunches. Did laundry. Paid the bills because mom doesn't know how. Took them to appointments. Went to parent-teacher meetings. Cooked dinner. Helped with homework. All of it. Her fingers flew across the tablet. How long? I did the math in my head. Since I was 10. She paused. 10 years old? I nodded. Mom had this partner who didn't want kids around, so she left a lot. I told her about faking signatures, explaining Elena's period, learning to cook from YouTube because mom could only make cereal. Then it was Elena's turn. My sister walked in with matted hair and a stained shirt. The moment the woman asked how things were going, Elena broke down. I'm so hungry all the time, she sobbed. Mom doesn't buy groceries. I don't know how to cook. Clara used to make everything. She talked about the recital, how everyone laughed. How mom didn't even know the dress needed to be dry cleaned. How she didn't know how to use the washer or the stove because I'd always done it. Then Marco. He slouched in, defensive. Yeah, I've been wearing this, he muttered, picking at his shirt. Nobody taught me laundry. Clara always did it. He admitted he missed his exam because nobody woke him up. That mom didn't even know what classes he took. That dinner lately was cereal or old snacks. He used his birthday money for fast food the day before. Finally, mom walked in, chin up like she could bluff her way out. We could hear her through the wall. What time does school start? The woman asked. Silence. What are their teachers' names? More silence. Elena's allergy? Marco's glasses prescription? Nothing. And then, like clockwork, she tried to blame me. This is Clara's fault, she snapped. She's being vindictive because I made her sign that agreement. Mrs. Laurent, the social worker said evenly, regardless of what Clara does or doesn't do, you are the parent. Mom started to spiral, voice rising, but the woman cut her off again. Can you tell me your son's grade level? Your daughter's shoe size? Their last dental appointments? Nothing. Not a word. The social worker stepped out and made a call right there in the living room. Yes, she said firmly. We need immediate intervention. Clear neglect. Uninhabitable environment. Mom's knees gave out. She clutched my arm, sobbing. Clara, please. Tell them you'll help. Tell them it's just temporary. I looked at her, really looked at her, and whispered. You made me sign an agreement. Remember? And for the first time, she didn't have anything to say. Within an hour, 2 more CPS workers pulled up to the house, clipboards in hand, cameras swinging from their necks. They moved through each room methodically, like they'd done this 100 times before. Click, click, click. Every sound of their camera shutters echoed through the walls. The smell of mildew in the bathroom hit them first. One worker pushed open the shower curtain with the tip of a pen and stepped back immediately. Black mold clung to the tiles like a living thing, creeping up the walls. The toilet looked like it hadn't been scrubbed in weeks. Downstairs, another worker documented the empty fridge, the overflowing trash, the mountain of dirty dishes crusted with dried food. And then one of them entered Elena's room and froze. On the carpet, right near her bed, were her blood-stained underwear from earlier that week. She hadn't known what to do when her period came, because I wasn't there anymore to help her. When they gently asked her about it, she broke. Her face crumpled like paper. I didn't know what to do without Clara, she sobbed. The sound of it punched me in the chest. A black SUV rolled up, and the case supervisor stepped out. She was an older woman with silver hair and a posture that said she'd seen every kind of disaster a family could offer. She flipped through the notes and photos without blinking. When she finally looked at Mom, her expression was carved out of stone. Mrs. Laurent, she said, voice calm but cutting through the air, based on what we found here today, we're placing both minor children in emergency protective custody. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mom collapsed, right there on the stained living room rug. She grabbed at the supervisor's pant leg, wailing so loud it made everyone freeze. Please, no, she sobbed. I just need more time. I can fix this. I swear. The supervisor shook her head. Ma'am, your children are living in unsafe conditions without adequate care or supervision. The words hung in the air like a sentence. The workers moved upstairs, their shoes thumping against the old wooden steps. I heard drawers opening and suitcases being unzipped. Elena ran after them, screaming for them not to touch her things. One of the workers gently blocked her, speaking softly, trying to explain. Marco just stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen in place. Confusion twisted into anger. Anger twisted into fear. And then he just shut down. The workers came back down with 2 small suitcases. Just 2. Everything they owned, everything they'd need for who knew how long, was crammed into those pitiful bags. Elena was shaking so hard she could barely breathe, her face blotchy and wet. She kept locking eyes with me like I was supposed to fix everything. Like I always had. But this time, I didn't move. Marco snapped out of his daze and tried to argue with the supervisor, insisting it was a misunderstanding. She listened without changing her expression and then told him gently, the decision's been made. Then Mom turned on me. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm so tightly her nails dug crescents into my skin. Her breath was hot and smelled like old coffee. Please, Clara. Just tell them you'll help. Tell them you'll take care of everything like you always do. I pried her fingers off my arm slowly. 1. By 1. You made me sign an agreement, I said quietly. Remember? I don't parent them anymore. Her voice turned into a scream, shaking me as tears streaked down her face. But the supervisor was faster. She stepped in, pulling Mom away. Clara, the social worker said softly as the chaos swirled around us, since you're over 18, you're not required to go with us. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I nodded. I already arranged to stay with my friend Sophie. I was planning to move out anyway. She gave me a small nod and handed me her card. If you need help, call me. When they led Elena and Marco toward the door, the storm hit. Elena spun around, her face red and twisted in rage. This is your fault, she screamed, her voice cracking. You did this on purpose. You wanted us to get taken away. Marco didn't say a word, but the way he looked at me. I'll never forget it. His expression said everything, that for the first time, he understood that actions had consequences. And he hated it. They were ushered into the black SUV, faces pressed against the rear glass. Mom chased after them, begging for another minute, sobbing so hard her voice broke. The supervisor had to physically hold her back. And then the car pulled away. And just like that, the house felt hollow. Mom stood in the driveway for 20 minutes after they left, staring at nothing. I went upstairs, packed my own bag, and called Sophie. Her mom picked me up not long after. She didn't ask a single question, just reached out and gently touched my hand when she saw my swollen eyes. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 17 calls. 8 voicemails. The first 3 were pure rage. You ruined everything, she screamed. The next 2 were desperate pleas. Please, Clara, help me get them back. The last 3 were a roller coaster, blaming me, apologizing, then blaming me again. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but all I could see was Marco's face as that SUV drove away. The next morning, Sophie's mom was making pancakes when the banging started on the front door. Mom stood there, hair sticking up, yesterday's mascara smudged down her cheeks like war paint. She stormed past Sophie's dad. I know she's here, she barked. Clara, you're coming home right now and we're fixing this. Sophie's dad blocked her. You need to leave. I'm her mother, she screamed. I can make her come home. Sophie's mom calmly picked up the phone. Leave now or I call the police. Mom's glare burned into me like acid before she stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall. 2 days later, Mrs. Schneider, the guidance counselor, called. Clara, she said gently, I heard what happened. I'm proud of you for protecting yourself. Her voice was warm, steady. She told me counseling was available, that the teachers had been worried for weeks. Some were relieved that someone finally stepped in. 3 days later, I got the notice, a family court hearing. I spent the night before printing everything. The signed agreement, screenshots of Mom's texts, and photos of the house falling apart. The courthouse downtown smelled like old floor wax and paperwork. Mom arrived 15 minutes late, wearing the same wrinkled shirt from days ago. Her hair was greasy, pulled back in a sloppy ponytail. And she was alone. Her boyfriend had clearly bailed. The judge, an older woman with kind but tired eyes, reviewed the CPS report. She read aloud the descriptions, the filth, the neglect, the children's statements. Then she looked directly at Mom. Can you tell me what medication your daughter takes for her allergies? The judge asked. Mom went silent. What about your son's learning accommodations plan? She blinked. His what? The judge's expression hardened. She ordered the bailiff to bring in Elena and Marco for a private conversation. Mom twisted her hands the entire time they were in chambers, looking at me like I could save her. I didn't move. When they returned, Elena's eyes were swollen and red. Marco's face was pale. The judge took 5 quiet minutes to finish her notes, and then delivered the verdict. Based on the inspection, the children's statements, and your demonstrated lack of basic parenting ability, the court orders that both children remain in foster care. You are required to complete a 12-week parenting course, individual therapy, and pass monthly inspections before the court will revisit custody. Mom started wailing so loudly the bailiff had to calm her down. And then, right in the middle of her meltdown, her phone rang. Her work number. She stepped outside to answer, but the door didn't block the sound. Her employer was letting her go. Too many absences. No more sick days. No more job. She came back in looking like she'd been punched in the gut. Outside the courthouse, I heard someone call my name. A woman with gray streaks in her hair and my mother's nose approached me. My aunt. I hadn't seen her since I was 10. She told me she'd heard everything. She apologized for not checking in, said she wished she'd known. She offered me a room at her place. I thanked her, but I'd spent 9 years being someone else's caretaker. I wanted, for once, to live for myself. She understood. She pressed her number into my hand anyway. A week later, while I was shelving books at work, a coworker mentioned seeing Marco at the grocery store with an elderly couple. He'd been arguing with them loudly, looking miserable. Later that day, one of his friends texted me, Marco and Elena had been placed in separate foster homes on opposite sides of town. Marco was struggling with the rules, bedtimes, chores, having to ask for permission for everything. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. He wasn't used to structure. He was used to me. And for the first time, it wasn't my job to fix it. 2 days later, my inbox lit up with a message from Elena's orchestra teacher. Her tone was soft, apologetic, the kind you use when you're delivering bad news. Elena, she explained, had to drop out of the program. Her foster placement was 45 minutes away, and transportation just wasn't possible anymore. She has so much potential, the teacher wrote. It's a shame to lose such a talented student. Is there any way to work something out? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing a calm, clipped response. I'm no longer her guardian. You'll need to contact CPS. The teacher replied shortly after. She understood. She was still heartbroken. That weekend, Mom called me sobbing. She'd just finished her first parenting class, the one court had ordered. She cried as she told me she had no idea how little she actually knew. They spent 2 hours talking about child development. Clara, she sniffled. I didn't know any of it. Not what's normal for a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old. Nothing. Her voice cracked when she admitted, they asked us to describe our morning routines with our kids, and I was the only one who didn't have one. Then came the inevitable, please help me. Just explain it so I can keep up. You've always been better at this. I inhaled slowly. If I help you, you'll never learn. That's the point of those classes. There was a beat of silence before she hung up on me. For the first time since I was 9, I started focusing on my own life. I picked up extra hours at the bookstore. I started saving for college. I learned I could still apply for spring semester at the state university. Then one of my coworkers mentioned a support group for people who were forced to be caregivers as kids. Parentified children, they called it. I signed up without overthinking it. The group met on Tuesday nights in the basement of a little church. The room smelled faintly of old wood and instant coffee. There were 8 of us, all different ages. The facilitator asked us to share our stories. One woman talked about raising 4 brothers while her mom worked 3 jobs. A guy my age had cared for his disabled sister since he was 7. Another girl used to handle bills and appointments for her family because her parents didn't speak English well. When it was my turn, I told them everything. The agreement. The collapse. The fallout. Nobody looked shocked. Nobody called me heartless. The facilitator nodded gently. What you went through wasn't normal. It was abuse, just in a form people often overlook. For the first time, I heard the word abuse applied to my life. It stung. But it also fit. We talked about the guilt, how it chews at you when you stop carrying the weight that never should have been yours. A woman in her 40s said it took her years of therapy to believe she deserved to live for herself. They handed me reading lists and links to resources. I didn't realize how hungry I was for understanding until that moment. Later that night, a text came through from an unknown number. Hey, can you let me into the house to get my stuff? Your mom's not answering. Just need my work clothes and laptop. It was Mom's boyfriend. I stared at the message for 2 seconds, then blocked the number without replying. 3 weeks passed like a deep exhale. I developed a rhythm. Work at the bookstore. Support group on Tuesdays. Sleep. Real sleep. Then one Tuesday afternoon, while making a sandwich in Sophie's kitchen, there was a sharp, desperate knock on the door. Sophie's mom opened it, and I heard a familiar voice, shaky, trembling. Marco. He stood there in ratty clothes with an overstuffed rucksack, his eyes red from crying. He started rambling before I could say a word. How he couldn't stay in the foster home anymore. How they had stupid rules about homework, chores, screen time, and bedtimes. How they treated him like a kid. You know me, he begged. Just let me stay here a few nights. Please. Sophie's mom glanced at me, her face calm, but concerned. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. Marco, I'm calling CPS. He froze. Then his face twisted, confusion, then anger. He lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but Sophie's mom stepped in between us like a wall. The operator on the emergency line recognized his name and promised someone would arrive within the hour. Marco sat on the front steps, refusing to look at me. When the social worker pulled up, the same woman from the original investigation, she gave me a small, quiet nod. They're both struggling, she told me softly. But they're finally getting support. Structure's hard when you've never had any. As her car drove away with him inside, my stomach twisted into knots. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. Then I cried for 20 straight minutes. A week later, Mom called again, voice cracking between gasps. They came for the inspection, she said. I thought I was ready. She wasn't. The inspector had walked into the kitchen and immediately started taking notes. Mold still clung to the shower. Damp laundry had been sitting for 3 days. The kids' rooms were untouched. Their beds hadn't even been changed. The judge extended foster care another 3 months. Mom sobbed into the phone about how unfair it all was. No one taught me how to do this, she cried. I didn't respond. The following Saturday at the grocery store, I ran straight into 2 women from Mom's church book club. They didn't even pretend to lower their voices. Ungrateful child, one of them muttered. She destroyed her own family. The other sighed dramatically. Those poor kids. CPS. What a shame. I didn't correct them. Mom had already rewritten the story for everyone else. I'd refuse to help and let CPS take her children away. That was the version she liked best. That same week, Sophie's mom sat me down at the kitchen table. A laptop was open in front of her, a neat folder beside it. Let's get you started, she said gently. She walked me through opening a checking account, how minimum balances worked, overdraft fees, and how to deposit checks on my phone. She helped me fill out the FAFSA form for college, something I didn't even know existed. Then she explained credit, leases, insurance, things Mom never bothered to teach me. We practiced writing checks together, old school style. It was the first time in my life an adult was actually teaching me how to live. 2 days later, a letter arrived from CPS. Elena had written it. The envelope was crumpled. The paper was smudged with tear stains. Her handwriting was shaky. She called me selfish. Cruel. She said I ruined everything, that I wanted her life to fall apart. That I could have fixed it all but didn't. She said she hated me. That her foster parents didn't understand her like I did. That it was my fault she lost orchestra, her friends, her stuff. I read it 3 times. And it still hurt. More than anything Mom ever said. In my next support group session, my therapist explained she's not ready to blame the person who hurt her. So she's blaming the safest person she's ever had, you. It didn't make the ache go away. But it helped me breathe through it. 3 weeks later, Mom called again, this time in a full-blown panic. She'd received an eviction notice. Without my bookstore paychecks, without me budgeting and paying bills, the rent hadn't been covered for 3 months. Late fees piled up. The landlord was done waiting. She sobbed about how the numbers don't make sense. About how she was trying her best. But trying and parenting aren't the same thing. Aunt Gabrielle, the same aunt who had offered me a place months earlier, took her in temporarily. 2 months into everything, a letter arrived from the court. It was official. Mandatory family therapy. All 4 of us. A court-appointed therapist. Attendance required. The road back wasn't going to be clean or pretty. But for once, it wasn't mine to carry alone. The session was scheduled for the following Thursday at the courthouse. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize Mom. Her hair was brushed and pulled back neatly, her clothes actually matched, and for the first time in years, she looked sober. There was a kind of forced neatness about her, like someone trying very hard to prove something. She sat across from me in the waiting area, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't speak. Neither did I. When our names were called, we walked into the small counseling room. The therapist, a calm woman with warm eyes and a notebook balanced on her knee, had arranged the chairs in a circle. She sat between me and Mom. Elena and Marco were across from us, slouched, arms crossed, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The therapist started gently, asking Mom to talk about what she'd learned in her parenting seminars. Mom straightened in her chair like a student giving an oral report. For nearly 10 minutes, she spoke about child development, age-appropriate expectations, emotional regulation, words that had clearly never been part of her vocabulary before this class. She explained how she'd never understood what kids needed at different ages and how much that had affected her parenting. Then the therapist asked her the question I had silently waited years to hear. What was Clara's role in your family before CPS got involved? Mom froze. Her voice didn't come immediately. Instead, she stared down at her hands, twisting the fabric of her skirt like it could give her the answer. The room was so quiet I could hear Elena sniffle. Finally, she lifted her head, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, I forced her to be the parent. Her voice cracked. I stole her childhood. I was selfish. I was never there. I didn't hit her, I didn't mean to hurt her, but it was abuse. I know that now. I made her carry everything that was mine to carry. She spoke through sobs, admitting, out loud, that what she had done wasn't love, it was neglect. The therapist scribbled notes, but I just sat there, feeling nothing. Not joy. Not anger. Just a hollow ache. 9 years too late. The therapist then turned to Elena. My sister's face folded in on itself, like a dam cracking open. She started to cry silently at first, wiping her nose with her sleeve, then words tumbled out between shaky breaths. I miss you so much it hurts, she said, voice raw. But I also hate you for letting everything fall apart. Why couldn't you just fix it like you always did? The therapist nodded gently, explaining that Elena's anger wasn't really meant for me. It's safer to be mad at your sister, she said softly, than at your mom. But Clara was just a child too. She was never supposed to carry that weight. Elena broke down completely, gasping for air through sobs. The therapist handed her tissues and waited patiently, letting the silence sit like a blanket over the room. Then it was Marco's turn. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. He picked at a hole in his jeans until the therapist asked the question 3 times. Finally, in a low mumble, he admitted what we both knew. I know what we did to Clara was wrong. I knew she was basically raising us. But I didn't want to lose that. It was easy. He looked up at me briefly, 2 seconds at most, and muttered, I'm sorry. It wasn't full of emotion. It wasn't warm. But it was real. The therapist wrote a few final notes and then lifted her gaze to all of us. She recommended ongoing individual therapy before we could even begin to think about being a family again. Your mother needs to continue building parenting skills, she said evenly. And Clara needs to keep defining her identity outside of being the caretaker. Mom nodded quickly, eager to prove herself. I made it clear, I wasn't going back to that house. Not now. Not ever. The session ended with a few follow-up appointments scheduled. We left the room quieter than we entered. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope waited for me when I came home from work. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Acceptance letter. Full scholarship. The words swam in front of me. I sat on Sophie's bed and cried until I couldn't breathe. Sophie's mom found me, wrapped me in her arms, and helped me fill out the housing forms that night. Orientation. Dorm assignments. A new beginning. The scholarship covered everything: housing, books, meal plan. For once, I wouldn't have to balance work, bills, and taking care of everyone else. I could just be me. Meanwhile, Mom continued her parenting classes. She called once to tell me she'd passed her first test. She sounded proud, genuinely proud, of knowing how to wash clothes at the right temperature and how to tell if chicken was cooked. It was surreal, hearing her celebrate things I'd mastered at 10. 6 weeks after Elena and Marco entered foster care, Mom passed her second home inspection at Aunt Gabrielle's house. A judge granted her supervised visitation. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first visit was awkward. Mom arrived 15 minutes late, flustered because she'd gotten lost. Elena spent most of the hour showing her math homework, and Marco barely spoke. The second visit went better. She brought snacks this time, even though she forgot about Elena's peanut allergy. By the third visit, she was improving. She came on time, brought safe food, and even tried to help Marco with a history project, though she got nearly every Civil War date wrong. He gave up halfway through, but at least she was trying. After 2 months, the judge expanded visits to weekends. Mom picked them up late the first Friday, typical, but eventually started getting better at keeping track of their schedules. Elena had orchestra again. Marco had a part-time grocery store job. Slowly, routines took shape. During the week, the kids stayed with their foster family for stability. On weekends, they were with Mom. For the first time, she was actually showing up. By August, it was time. I packed my life into 2 bags and a backpack. Sophie's parents drove me to campus, helped me lug everything to my 3rd-floor dorm. My roommate unpacked her string lights and complained about her mom calling too much. I smiled, pretending to understand. The first week of classes felt like stepping into a different world, one where no one knew my past. I was just another student trying to find the dining hall and remember my class schedule. 3 weeks into the semester, I got a notification from Instagram. Elena had posted a photo of herself next to a washing machine, captioned, "My foster mom taught me how to separate colors from whites, smiley face." It was small, but I stared at it for a long time. I liked the post and sent her a heart emoji. It was enough. A month later, Marco messaged me on Facebook. "Can you look at my college essay? I just need grammar help." A few seconds later, NVM. "I forgot you're not supposed to help." We both sent those laughing crying emojis after that. It was weird. But also, lighter. Mom stuck with the weekend visits. Reports said she was remembering routines, preparing lunches, asking about homework even if she couldn't help with it. Eventually, the judge granted her a full spring break trial. I watched from my dorm room as Elena posted pictures of the park and Marco uploaded a video of Mom making pancakes from scratch for the first time. They looked terrible, half burned, half raw, but everyone was laughing. That alone was something I'd never witnessed before. When the week ended without disaster, the judge approved full reunification after the school year. Aunt Gabrielle took over the finances. Mom focused on parenting. The kids moved back. 3 weeks later, Mom texted, inviting me to dinner. I sat in the car outside Gabrielle's house, heart pounding. I had never visited home before, I had always been the home. Inside, the smell of garlic bread and spaghetti filled the air. Real food. Not takeout boxes stacked in corners. The living room was cluttered, but no longer a disaster zone. Mom came out of the kitchen in an apron with flour in her hair, looking nothing like the woman from that first CPS visit. Elena proudly showed me her report card. 2 C's, 3 B's, and 1 A-. Not perfect. But earned. Marco told me about his grocery job, the $400 he'd saved for a car, and how proud his manager was of him. Mom asked to talk outside while the kids did the dishes. A real chore chart now existed. On the porch, she broke down crying. She apologized for everything. For the 9 years she stole from me. For the childhood she ignored. For being too wrapped up in men and parties to notice me growing up alone. She listed every small thing she wished she'd done differently. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. When I went back inside, Elena was waiting by the door. She asked if she could hug me. And when I said yes, she held on tight. She whispered an apology for blaming me. Her foster mom had helped her understand I had been a child too. "You saved yourself," she said softly. "And I get it now." She showed me a bracelet she'd made in therapy, colorful beads spelling out sister. She wore one too, so we matched. Marco walked over and gave me a gentle punch on the shoulder, his awkward way of saying thank you. He admitted he'd known all along how much I was carrying but didn't want to lose the easy life I gave him. "You made us grow up," he said quietly. And we needed that. 6 months after CPS knocked on our door, everything looked different. Mom could cook 5 meals, simple but real. The kids did their own laundry and homework. I was in college, building a life that was mine. Mom would never be perfect. She'd never undo the years she stole. But she was trying, maybe for the first time ever. My siblings were learning to stand on their own 2 feet. And me? I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was the first real act of love I'd ever given, to all of us.